Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water with Joyce, Aldrich. Refresh your mind.
It's 15 degrees at 8:01 here at CHHA 1610 AM. And I'll tell you something, I don't know, I just planned my programs just great. I'd already figured this one out before the weather happened, but, this is February and it's Black History Month. And we're going to be taking you this evening to Central Africa. And in studio this evening I have Geoffrey Clarfield, who's going to be talking about the problems facing an indigenous tribe there, and that is the Bayaka tribe, the Pygmies. And so we're going to be turning our attention to them, and Geoffrey's going to help us to understand their plight, and that will be very important. You know, we would talk a lot about what the black problems are here, what they're facing here in Western, the West, but really in Africa there's also a huge problem, and we need to take a look at that. We're going to listen to a little bit of music from the Bayaka tribe, and this is a beautiful, you can be hearing actually music right through the program. This is called Enyomo. This just gives you an idea of the beautiful music that these wonderful people produce, and I'm going to listen to this for a little bit until and then we'll come in with Geoffrey in just a bit. It's a very long piece, but just to set the mood on this very rainy, misty day. And that's a piece called Enyomo. We're going to let this play out a little bit underneath while we welcome Geoffrey Clarfield, anthropologist at large, to the program here at A Drink of Water. Come close to the mic there, Geoffrey.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
Especially to talk about the Pygmies and not just the problems they're facing, but the wonderful aspects of their culture and society, which we're listening to right now.
Exactly. Something that's a rich heritage. Well, tell me a little bit about the Pygmies and how ancient are they? Because they've been here for how many years? Like thousands?
Thousands. The Pygmies they're short people. There's a reason that that's the case. It's biological. It's genetic. It's an adaptation to the rainforest. It's complex.
Yes.
And they're spread from the border of Tanzania all the way across the Central African rainforest countries to Gabon and Cameroon.
What square? How many hectares would that be?
That's thousands of miles.
Yeah,
that's from one side of Africa
To the other.
To the other side.
Yeah.
Right across. And largely in the ancestral rainforests, which are under terrible threat right now from loggers and coltan and uranium miners and tribal gangs and, you name it, diamond prospectors. It's a very, very sad situation what's going on there.
Not unlike...
Exploitation,
Well, I was thinking
violence.
not unlike when it reminded me of Wounded Knee with the uranium and all of that. You know,
It's
it's
interesting.
very indigenous. Like it almost,
Yeah.
it's that same kind of exploitation.
Well, the important point to make in this Black History Month is that the Pygmies are the indigenous people of Central Africa.
Yes.
They've been there for 15, 20,000 years. And I don't just say this as an outsider looking in. When you go into the ethnography of that area,
Yes.
the tribes among whom they live, amongst whom they're embedded, are agriculturalists, largely Bantu. And the
Yes.
Bantu themselves say, well, these are the first people. When our ancestors came here, the Pygmies were here. And one of the metaphors they use, in a positive sense, is the Pygmies are our compass. The Pygmies showed us how to get access to honey. They taught us how the rainforest works and what to do with it. So the Pygmies are the indigenous people. They've been there for 20, 30,000 years.
Yes.
They've adapted to the forest in a very balanced way. And they have this phenomenal music, which we're listening to now, which is polyrhythmic, which is polyphonic, which is participatory, and which is danceable. And you can hear the yodeling and the haka technique. And the crazy thing about this is that a number of ethnomusicologists believe that this style is probably 50,000 years old. And contrary to what you may imagine, that you imagine perhaps that in the late Stone Age, music started off with a few grunts and a basic melody, and like we're all taught in high school when we study European classical
Hollowed
music.
out drum.
Yeah,
a log.
at best.
Yeah, at best.
And then slowly harmony and rhythm develop. But it's probably like the cave paintings of Spain and France.
Which are quite incredible.
Incredible.
And it's sophisticated.
That's right. So art and music sort of sprung from the head of Zeus, fully formed. And without, I can go into greater detail on the argument behind this. But the incredible thing is just to simply think, wow, this is the sound of our ancestors. This is where it all came from. On the other hand, when you listen to the Bantus and West African and jazz and rock, they probably adopted this polyrhythm and this fantastically busy style from the Pygmies. So you can even say that rock, jazz, and blues have a Pygmy origin. That's not just me saying.
No, the Afro rhythms.
That's right.
Like Cuban music has over 2,000
Absolutely.
different rhythms
That's
in
right.
it. So where did they get
That's
that
right.
from?
Well, they got it from West Africa and Central Africa and
Exactly.
Angola, and you have to ask yourself, where did those guys get it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's go back to the
Yeah,
Pygmies,
and
which is amazing.
So we owe every musician working in that field owes the Pygmies big time, including Jimi Hendrix and Prince.
So what can we do to help them? Because how are they living right now, and what's their situation there?
Well,
50,000 years later.
50,000 years later. It's
Like,
amazing how time flies,
fast
isn't it?
forward, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're living two lives. Pygmies are hunter-gatherers.
Mm-hmm.
They hunt animals, sometimes with nets, sometimes with spears. They were formerly elephant hunters, but they wouldn't hunt the elephants for more than they needed them. They would simply hunt an elephant that would provide a village with a month or two of meat.
Mm-hmm.
Very sustainable harvesting management of the forest. And that kind of balance lasted till about 1,000, 2,000 years ago, when the population of Africa increased because of the invention of African agriculture, the digging stick mode of production, as
Yes.
French scholars like to say. And slowly, these Bantus largely, and other groups, Nilotic groups, started pushing into the forest, and they created this symbiotic relationship where The Pygmies would give them elephant meat, and they'd give them ivory, and they'd give them honey, and the Bantu would give them sorghum, and they'd give, various agricultural
things.
things.
Built trading
networks.
Yeah.
It was asymmetrical.
Yeah.
From the outside in, it looked like a master-serf relationship, but the Pygmies could always retreat into the forest, where they lived this egalitarian existence. And that lasted till after World War II, because, as you know, Africa was colonized in that part of the world largely by the French and the Belgians,
yes.
the Belgian Congo.
Right, yeah.
And so those countries became independent, and the newly educated elites, who were largely urban-based and Bantu and Nilotic and otherwise, took over the means of administration and inherited these instantly independent countries. Europe and North America and now China needed natural resources. They needed timber, they needed tin and bauxite and various kinds of things.
Sure.
And so that late industrialization of the last 50, 60 years have pushed the Pygmies deeper and deeper into the forest until there's no place to go.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
so even when I was in Central Africa a few years ago, I spent about a month with the Pygmies. The forest is enormous. I flew over it, I drove through it, and it's a hard thing to describe. It's just so massive and vast and widely spread. But
well, it's this huge canopy. That's what they
right.
call it. It's the canopy,
and it goes for hundreds, sometimes
yeah.
thousands of miles. But you'll see these convoys of trucks with cut timber, with logs, 6 feet, 15 feet wide, which are going down to the coast and off to the factories and the furniture shops in Indonesia and China. So some of them now are moving to these little urban centers. Some of them are working for pay for the lumber companies.
Right.
Some of them are guides for hunters. It's a mixed existence. When I was there, I got a taste of traditional village life and went out into the forest, and also saw what's going on at the trading center. And
Sure.
when you have those kinds of traumatic modernization processes, there's alcoholism and family breakdowns. So they're living a bifurcated world.
Happened here. It happened in North America with our
certainly
indigenous
did.
people.
It certainly
It sounds like a very familiar story.
It's a very familiar story, and the reason we don't hear about it much is I don't think it's for racist reasons. I think it's that there's not much interest, for whatever reason, in sub-Saharan Africa, in Canada, more so in the United States because of the history of slavery there,
Right.
but much less so here. And so Africa's not really on people's minds here. And so Africa's not one country. It's not one people. There are myriads of people.
Yeah.
And Africa has its First Nations.
It's a continent.
It's a continent. Africa has its First Nations. And the Pygmies are the First Nations. There's no doubt about it.
Right. So
And they're having similar problems.
exactly. But
They're not given citizenship. They're treated as second-class citizens. Their land is grabbed. During the horrible height of the civil war in what's now called the Democratic Republic of Congo, there were massive rapes in Rwanda. Although the Rwandese government right now says we're all Rwandese, they don't make distinctions on tribal and ethnic background. The Batwa, the similar ethnic group of the Bayaka, were slaughtered more than anyone else. And it got terrible. They were accused of witchcraft, and women were raped, and villages were burned, and that sort of stuff.
the vilifying, that happens the first thing, and victimizing.
That's right. So the Pygmies are dispersed and widespread. Perhaps we think that they had an ancestral language, but they've lost them. There's certain vocabularies when it has to do with hunting and honey gathering and music, which suggests that they had an ancestral language. But they're spread out. So there's Pygmies here and Pygmies there, and a few hundred miles away. So the population ratio will be something like 100 to 1 in any area, perhaps 1,000 to 1.
So has there been a count of population of Pygmies in
That's
Africa?
a good question.
Do they know?
They think that maybe there's a few 100,000, or maybe a little less than 500,000
So
spread
not that
across.
many.
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Because their population doesn't grow. As I said earlier, they're very, very balanced. They space their children so that resources wouldn't be stressed. And all that's changing now.
A lot of wisdom. We're going to have to go
Much
to break,
wisdom.
Geoffrey.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we're going to listen to some more beautiful Pygmy music and find out more about these beautiful people.
I love sharing their music.
Absolutely. You're going to talk about it. Tell us all about it. We'll be back right after this.
Righto.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
It is turning into CHHA 1610 AM. You're listening to A Drink of Water. And that is the beautiful music of the Bayaka tribe of Pygmies in Central Africa. And that particular tune is called Mandome, if you can call it a tune. And we're here with anthropologist Geoffrey Clarfield. And Geoffrey has a beautiful website if you want to go to it. That's geoffreysjourneys.com. You can see some beautiful photos there in his photo gallery of Africa. And he's got a lot of interesting things there you can take a look at. Geoffrey, so
Yes,
this
ma'am.
beautiful music
It
from
is,
the
isn't
Pygmies.
it?
It is. So, I mean, I had to stop because I thought, I'm going to fall asleep. Is that like a rain stick in there? Is that too primitive an idea?
No, those are zithers.
What
Those
are
are stringed
zithers?
instruments, and one of them.
Like that sound like a rainforest, almost like a
Well,
rain
that's
stick?
the
A
rainforest.
rain-
You can actually hear the insects chirping in the forest while that's
So the
playing.
music, it's like Frank Lloyd Wright music. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
it's-
how you the architecture goes
Yeah,
with nature. Their music just melds in with their environment.
It melds in and it emerges
Oh.
from, and it's somewhat hypnotic as the forest is. And when I talked about those zithers, one of them is a handheld harp, and the shape
Right.
of the harp is very similar to the kind of harps that you see in ancient Egypt, painted on the walls.
Oh, okay.
And that's not just whimsical. There's an inscription, I think it's from 3,000 or 4,000 years ago in Egypt,
Yes.
about a pharaoh who had heard about the Pygmies in the Central African forest. They heard that they were very gifted dancers and musicians. And he sent an expedition out to bring some back.
Yeah.
And the inscription goes on that they did bring a pygmy dancer musician back, and he was beloved of Pharaoh. And part of the inscription warns the people on the expedition that they should be very, very careful and make sure this pygmy is very well taken care of.
Oh.
And he's going to be the apple of the eye of the Pharaoh. So, as I say, there's a modern aspect, a contemporary aspect, but there's also a very ancient aspect. And one can imagine that kind of music at the court of Pharaoh. Who knows? Maybe Moses himself was a big fan of Pygmy music. I'd like to think so.
I would think so. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking
He had taste and
David's
class.
harp. I'm thinking of David playing his harp, you know.
That's right.
And maybe it was one of these.
That's right. Well, it's from the same family of stringed instruments that ethnomusicologists called chordophones because they're made of chords.
Ah, okay.
But we don't, other than the fact that we see this kind of instrument on the walls of Egyptian tombs, it's hard to figure out which way it went. Did it start from Central Africa and go to Egypt, or the other way around? We're not sure yet.
We'd like to think that the Pygmies did it because so far, you know, they're like rock stars right now.
I have a positive Pygmy prejudice. I think they are the most, and I'm not alone. Alan Lomax, the great late American ethnomusicologist, Louis Sarno, who recorded this music and who hosted me in the Central African Republic. We all think that the Pygmies are really musical genii.
So there's a film in the making, or has been made. Tell me about this film.
The film is also about music, and it deals with the Batwa, which is the name of the Pygmies in Uganda.
Okay.
A number of years ago, I managed to get to the Central African Republic to do a kind of checking things out for a month to see if we could do a film on Pygmies there, and they used that experience to talk about the systematic persecution and the fabulous things that the Pygmies have given to the world and still give to the world.
Yes.
So I spent that time in Central African Republic. I came home and a horrible civil war broke out. And eventually the other producer, myself, found a young Canadian filmmaker named Daniel Rohr, who had been traveling in Uganda and Rwanda and took on the cause and went there and did a film on the expulsion of the Batwa Pygmies from the rainforests of Uganda, which are now game parks where people can go and watch the gorillas. Remember Diane Fossey?
Yes.
And Gorilla in the Mist? Well, those people were pushed out, very often violently, in the 1990s to create these game parks with the blessing of no other than the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the WWF, the IUCN, various NGOs, the World Bank, USAID, the whole kit and caboodle.
What a double-edged sword. Because
Terrible.
something that people are thinking, we're going to this beautiful park, and it's a
Yeah.
game reserve, and it's all of this, and it's
That's right.
ecological, and all
You
the
got it. You
all
got
the
it.
all the
Yeah.
greenies are
Yeah.
going there, and they
There-
don't realize how that
Yeah.
happened. Oh,
There's
I didn't know.
No, and you wouldn't. There's a book called Conservation Refugees, written by an American ecologist.
Right.
And so the Batwa of Uganda are definitely conservation refugees, and
Where
Daniel,
are they now?
they're living in slums outside the game parks.
That's just
Alcoholism, family breakdown, poverty, garbage collection, and stuff like that.
somebody should
Yeah.
be in jail forever.
Well, it's hard to take the heads of government to jail for that, because they would argue that Uganda had a horrible civil war under the dictatorship of Idi Amin, and they freed the Ugandans, and all Ugandans are equals, and some citizens have to move over for others. But it's interesting because I wanted to mention this later in the program, but I think I'll take this opportunity now. You
Sure.
said, what can we do for them? Canada is has a very special persona in the Central Africa, in places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Gabon, partly because that's Francophonie, those are French-speaking
Right.
African cultures, and partly because Canada is not seen as a colonial power, unlike the Europeans. And so it has a kind of moral stature, and governments will listen to Canadian diplomats.
Right.
And Canada gives a lot of development assistance to those countries. It gives millions each year to Uganda, Gabon, DRC,
Right.
Congo, trying to think of other countries that have pygmy populations, Cameroon. And it wouldn't be a difficult thing for the Canadian government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to say, we're going to take 5 or 10% of our budget and we're going to rehabilitate these people. Now, that doesn't mean they have to go back to the rainforest. They could go back as guides. They could go back as conservation officers.
Yeah,
But at least their
give them
basic health
something.
needs
Yeah.
need to be dealt with. at least their basic education, at least their ability to integrate into the economy. I'm not being a romantic.
No, but a realist.
And here's the deal, Joyce, is that if we assume that the Pygmies are the indigenous peoples of Africa, and Canada is going through a very challenging process of coming to recognize the injustices done to our own indigenous people, a penny wouldn't be spent on these governments if this was within Canada. So on the one hand, there's a blindness. On the other hand, there's a great opportunity for Canadians to be moral superstars and say to the other donors, very much so, and say...
Partner indigenous to indigenous.
That's right.
Because it's the same thing.
Very similar.
Very similar,
and, the national governments don't have to be taken to task, because they'll say, and I've worked with high-level government, they'll say, look, we're developing nations, there's trade-offs. Okay, there's trade-offs. That doesn't mean that these people have to be slum dwellers in the capital city because they lost their homelands. So that's something we can do. We can write our MP. And the film that I produced and Daniel made called Ghost of Our Forest, I have every intention of taking it to Ottawa. I've spoken to Peter Kent. I've spoken to Carolyn.
Peter Kent. He's a wonderful advocate.
I've also spoken to Carolyn Bennett of
Michelle
the Liberals.
Rempel would be great to talk to her.
And we want to make this bipartisan. In that this kind of foreign policy has nothing to do with whether you vote for NDP, Liberal, or Conservative. It's an external expression of our growing historical self-understanding. So there's a lot we can do.
We're going to go to break, and we'll be talking more about this. This is very interesting. So we'll be back right after these messages with more of a drink of water and Geoffrey Clarfield, anthropologist at large.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
Hello, Katimbi, Bamuya, Madame Texan Baku, Bakumba, Sende, I never come back to Mama. Oh, is I ever oh, is I Comme put you are, même à la nambi bebleti. Comme nambi bebleti. Oh, je n'avais que les mots à tes mamaya. Oh, putain, les collègues comme un acrobaya. Oh, you are. Look at what alors, il y a des roches à Bellore. Ah, qu'on est tous dans la vaca. Bloqué. Oh, mama, que la matas que me la toba, baiko, ya. Yo, ale, rosa, te oh, debo la que da, maiko, me calia. Oh, no te queda, maiko, que da, me tire. Ole, la mueque, que la mala que con la teluya. Ay, tú. ¿Ule? Mona de coche, la mala que mata, se do, que la mala que la mueque, que la mala que ay, que motra maleco, me bati, que la mano bella, ve que la maleco, maquetela, vengamos. La maleco de cotorrea, la maleco de locatea, la maleco de madera, cobeta, lo llega. No, hey. Ya que te me pongo me suba boya te e no le que la mano cote na cote no lo capo na da te va na cote ya na de lo que la mano
and that's you're listening to Drink Water, and that's Again, another beautiful song by the Bayaka tribe, the Pygmies, and that's called Gidal. And my goodness, we're here with Geoffrey Clarfield, who's an anthropologist, journalist, and an adventurer. And I'm listening to this. I got a complete smile on my face because it's such happy, beautiful music, and it's hard to imagine people living in slums outside of where they used to live, where there was a beautiful rainforest, not being cared for. We know how it happened, but that it continues to happen is a travesty, and we know it's a travesty in our own country. And like you said, we can team up Canada with them and get and with your film. I'm going on. Blah.
That's okay.
But what's the name of the film?
Ghosts of Our Forest.
Ghosts of Our Forest. You did say that before, but
Yeah. And the story of the film is interesting. Is a number of years ago, I was following. Well, I'll go even farther back. Is that for 6 years I lived and worked in Tanzania, and during one of those years I was on the shores of Lake Tanganyika.
Oh, Tanganyika!
Yeah,
learned
beautiful.
About that in school.
One of the biggest freshwater lakes in the world. That's where we get all our tropical fish from.
Livingston went, or
he did.
He did. I know. I remember my
That's
history.
Where Dr. Livingston, I presume, was spoken.
Right.
There's
a
little museum there in Kigoma, where I was living.
Yeah, I didn't forget anything in school there.
There you have it.
The only thing I remembered. Go ahead.
Yes.
Tanganyika.
Joyce Aldrich, I presume.
Yes.
Anyways, on the other side, you can actually see the Congo, and the Civil War was going full hog at the time, and boatloads of refugees were coming into the refugee camps every day. And I started reading and hearing about what was happening to the Pygmies, because every anthropologist and ethnomusicologist worth his or her salt has listened to Pygmy music, and more so read the phenomenal novelistic ethnography of about the Pygmies in the Ituri forest by the late British anthropologist Colin Turnbull, The Forest People. He was an absolute brilliant writer and ethnographer, and spent a lot of time with the Pygmies, recorded their music, and just really loved them. And it describes a kind of a pre-expulsion from Eden society. And
interesting.
One would think that maybe he was exaggerating, but he wasn't. So it is quite possible that the Pygmies represent, at one level, mythologically, that Edenic life before the expulsion of Eden, and at an even deeper level, the possibility that society can be constituted with a beautiful trade-off between individuality and egalitarianism. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So the Pygmies have a lot to teach us.
Well, what kind of government do they have? Like, do they have government? Like, you talk about egalitarianism. What does that look like in a Pygmy society?
The British, when they went to Africa, were trying to figure out who the rulers were, and the anthropologists figured out that a lot of societies don't have rulers, that they manage things without rulers, and they wrote this book called Tribes Without Rulers.
Go figure.
If you have convention and a notion of natural right, and you have customs and traditions which enforce a kind of equality, then you're going to have very little conflict. There are murders now and then, but the assumption is that all men and women are created equal. And when it comes to sexual politics, Pygmy women are pretty independent. They're not as oppressed as the women in more hierarchical agricultural societies.
Well, so each person has their place, they have their purpose,
place, their family, their clan, their lineage, and their role in life. And the traditional Pygmy life is affluent in the sense that to get enough protein and vegetables to eat well does not take 70 or 80 hours a week. It takes a few days. There are things to pull up from the ground. There's honey, and there's hunting meat. And sharing is central. You have to share. If you go on YouTube, you'll see these wonderful films about a gifted pygmy hunter bringing down an elephant, and then the whole village converges on the elephant, and everyone's cutting off pieces of meat. It's a lot more structured than you'd think. Everyone has rights. It's a culture based on sharing.
Well, wouldn't that be beautiful? You know, there's something that was passed by me and about Pygmies perhaps being able to help us solve the drug addiction epidemic in Western civilization. And when I think about, I'm going to say that we have a serious drug addiction problem, and amidst not just black culture, white culture, everybody, but there is a strong drug culture amidst the black culture as well. And to be able to have someone from, that's almost like a yin-yang thing, I don't know how to explain it. Wouldn't it be wonderful? How you explain that to me? Because I can't. I'm talking too much. You have the answer.
Well, whether it's African Canadians or African Americans or poor whites in Appalachia who have a horrible opiate addiction culture.
Oh, and the fentanyl now, and that's scary. Scary. It's hitting everywhere.
I've given this a lot of thought. The drug addiction syndromes that plague the modern world have to do with the feeling of alienation. And I think it has something to do with media in the sense that we all can't be Justin Bieber, we all can't be Madonna, we can't be as famous as Justin Trudeau. Therefore, who am I? Unless you're given a strong family background and have a feeling of place and community, you're going to feel overwhelmed. And the quickest way of dealing with feelings of being overwhelmed is drugs. Now, I've been told by serious people that there's a drug addiction, cocaine habit going on in our fancy private schools here in the GTA. So this is not anything new, I'm saying. Now, the wonderful thing about the Pygmies in the rainforest is that a group of Pygmies in Gabon in the west have a hallucinogenic plant, which I think is called ibogaine. That's the scientific name for it. And they use it for their initiation rites of young Pygmies.
Is that like ayahuasca, or is it
It's like ayahuasca. It's similar to, but
like
I don't.
Hallucinogenic?
It's hallucinogenic.
Highly, they're all highly
big time,
hallucinogenic.
Visionary, and people in drug addiction work in Switzerland and South Africa investigated, and they started using it in clinics, and in a significant minority of cases, people who are alcoholics and heroin addicts, with psychiatric help and the use of ibogaine, they've managed to kick the habit. I have been told...
Better than methadone.
Better than methadone, by far. I have been told
terrible.
There's actually a clinic in Toronto working on it, but I unfortunately haven't followed through, and maybe I should go down there, do an interview, and you can have me back.
Have them back with you.
So to draw this notion full circle, is the rainforest has probably thousands of plants which are used medicinally in various capacities by Pygmies over the last 30,000 years, and who knows what diseases either that exist or that may come to exist, because evolution is smart and it creates, unfortunately, new things that we'll be able to gain from them. So if you're thinking of
there's another way of looking at that, because if you talk about, you said about evolution, but if you talk about the other side of it, say, God or Hashem put every cure on the planet before there was a disease.
You know what? That goes back to the Garden of Eden metaphor.
That's right.
That the rainforest is this fabulous Garden of
there
Eden, where you have cures for every known possible disease,
and in the rainforest in South America as well.
South America, without a doubt.
And these are like they're mirrors.
They are mirrors. They are there, and they probably go back.
Probably were joined at one time.
Yeah, if I was a biological historian, I'd be able to point to. I don't know if it's Pangaea or that big continent, but the tragic thing is that we are not even recognizing, the scientific community somewhat, the medical community somewhat, but our governments are not recognizing that the protection of the rainforest from unsustainable logging and uranium and coltan extraction and the persecution of the people and the killing of the gorillas and the chimpanzees and every other species, they call it the game meat trade, is actually not in our immediate selfish modern economic interest. It actually goes against it. We're killing the source of the cure for so many of the things that bother us. And ibogaine is just one example, one fabulously powerful but tragic example of how, by destroying the rainforest and destroying the traditional life and society of the Pygmies, we're also destroying that knowledge base.
I was just going to say, it's like destroying Alexandria.
Precisely.
I mean,
Precisely.
why would you do that? Burn it down? Well, because it was there. I don't know. It's terrible, horrifying.
Yeah.
Or the Tibetans, when the Chinese came in, they lost all of their surgical books.
Yeah.
Only their diagnostic books they were able to grab. All the surgical books were burned.
So indigenous
Like
knowledge is not something to make fun of. It's not something to provoke. There's this wonderful story about Somalia, I think, in the 1800s, and a British elephant hunter comes in, and someone has malaria, and he said, well, it's the bad air. And I think the Somali tribe says, no, it's the mosquitoes that give it to them. I may have got the ethnic. It may have been.
No, but they knew.
Tribe,
they knew.
Yeah. They certainly knew.
They figured that out. Yeah.
And ethnobiology is a very, very important thing, and we ignore it at our risk. What can I say?
I'm going to direct people back to jeffreysjourneys.com. Jeffrey.
That's
Did I just call you Geoffrey Joffrey?
Everyone does
and
it.
I know you, Joffrey, for a long time here,
Everyone
so this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Geoffrey's Journeys, GeoffreysJourneys.com, jeffreysjourneys.com, and you'll find a lot there. We've got a couple of minutes to break, so we need to do we need to have a cause, and people who don't know what they want to help with, they can, this whole thing with, I like the partnering of Canada. Mm-hmm. Are you pivotal in this? Are you
I'm working on it.
Can people contact you if they're interested?
Yeah, they can. I'm going to take this film up to Ottawa. I'm also going to screen it locally and talk about these issues.
Down at the Royal or something, yeah?
Sorry?
Down at the Royal, that's a good place.
Yeah, why not? But I come at it from two aspects. I come at it from public sector and private sector. Public sector, I go to Ottawa, I lobby, I write in newspapers, I appear on radio, for example, with you. I hope to go on CBC. But I also run safaris. So I'm taking a group of people on safari up the Rift Valley of Kenya, April 30th to May 10th. You can read all about it
on jeffreysjourneys.com.
On Geoffrey's Journeys. And we're following the footsteps of Joy Adamson, one of the great conservationists of our time. Remember, Born Free, da-da-da-da.
Yeah,
So we're following in her footsteps. And one of the many reasons that I take people on safari to Kenya and to Tanzania is to open them up to these questions. When you're watching the elephants in the Masai Mara, when you're on the sacred Mount Niru, near Lake Turkana, where the Leakeys have found our ancestors, and you're looking at the rainforest, it reconfigures your unconscious. And you begin to recognize the connections between Africa and the rest of the world. Because as I said earlier, it's not for any prejudicial reasons. It's just not, people are not interested. People are busy. Africa is a confusing, complex, and wonderful place.
People still see it as deepest, darkest Africa,
right.
and they can't fathom it because it's so deep and so dark.
And so this is my way of getting back to Africa each year. And, after a game drive or after a walk or a hike through a rainforest, these are the issues that come up. And it's the softest sell in the world. And I want these people to come back and write their MPs and specifically focus on the Pygmies. There's many, many other issues in Africa, but this is the one that I've chosen.
That is pivotal, central, and it's
foundational. I think
foundational. That's the word I was looking for.
Foundational.
Well, we got to go to some foundational messages. We'll be back right after this with more of a drink of water here on CHHA 1610 AM. It's 8:45.
From Toronto, Canada, CHHA 1610 AM, the voice of our community, because we are a part of your daily life.
Radio Voces Latinas. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at CHHA 1610 AM.
CHHA 1610 AM. Radio Voces Latinas. More voices 24 hours through. Programming continues.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
And that's Boyobe, and you're listening to the music of the Pygmy people from Central Africa. And, on this 15-degree and misty and moist day here in Toronto, what better way than to have Geoffrey Clarfield, anthropologist at large, here in studio to talk about these marvelous people who are struggling to survive and struggling to keep their home, the rainforest, which is not just their home, it's ours as well. This whole planet is our home, Geoffrey.
Absolutely. We all came from Africa. More 50,000 years ago. If you go and do those genetic tests, you'll find out that you have African genes. It's where we came from, and we have to take care of it because it belongs to everyone.
Yeah, and if these are the indigenous people of Africa...
They are.
Yeah, they are.
They are our cousins and brothers and sisters. It's that simple.
Absolutely. We need to help them. We need to get our heads out of a hole.
Right. And as it says in the Bible, am I my brother's keeper? The answer is yes.
Absolutely. We're so caught up in what's happening in the West.
Yes.
And the West won't survive without what's happening with the Pygmies, for instance. And what's happening in South America as well. A lot of stuff is happening there as well.
The Amazon.
Absolutely.
Very
so people who are here, who are from South America, who are listening in tonight, can absolutely relate to this story.
Yes.
So any of you who want to go on this wonderful... Are there any spots left on this safari?
There are a few spots left, yeah.
So go to joffreysjourneys.com if you want to go to safari with Geoffrey in April. Wow. Right. Amazing.
And I promise to take people up to the rainforest near Lake Turkana. Almost no one goes there. It's a magical place. It's a sacred mountain.
Wow, sacred mountain. Oh, sacred mountains, sacred spaces, and
sacred music.
Sacred music. Now, tell me a little bit about this music. This is kind of special. You want this Boyobe.
Well, it's the polyrhythm. It's the participatory nature. It's joyful. It's ecstatic, and as you picked up, it's the happiness of people who are at home in their world.
Yeah.
There's nothing fake about this. This is the real McCoy. This is where all our music comes from. And we really have to take care of not only the music, but the people who produced it, because that's their gift to the world.
A 50,000-year-old gift.
That's right.
50,000 years. We have the news is so filled. I understand. If you talk about, we have so many... I don't like the word diversity. Mm-hmm. I never have liked it, and I wish people would just stop using it. Find another word, okay? And we really need unity in this on this planet. Diversity is probably, I think it's equal to anarchy, to be honest. It's like, maybe I'm wrong.
It's a word that's lost its meaning. It's become
it's like
politically
love.
Correct.
Yeah.
We need.
It's a catch. It's like it's used for every little thing.
That's
right.
right.
And I'm tired of it. We need the unity word, something, and to bring us all together, something that's going to...
The Pygmies and the rainforest are things that bind us to one another.
Yeah.
When the astronauts look down at the Earth, there's no boundaries. There are no borders. And when they go over Africa, they see this amazing, misty green thing, which people have called the lungs of the world.
Well, that's another thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, are really the guardians of the forest, as are the indigenous peoples of the Amazon. And they've been doing it for us. And we simply put aside diversity. Let's talk about fairness. We need to treat them fairly because they've been taking care of our environment with the most fundamental justice and fairness that one can ever imagine.
And love. Because it's like they are the guardians.
And they love the forest. And if you read about the Pygmies, you read Colin Turnbull's book, if you look at Daniel Rohr's film Ghosts of the Forest, you'll see that they love the forest. And I believe the forest loves them back.
Boy, oh boy. We still got a few minutes. Maybe what we'll do is
let's listen.
Let's just listen out to the Yay. Yay or yay 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 yay. We're gonna.
Oh, by the way,
yay.
The Bayaka have a word called oka, which they use to say everything's okay. And Louis Sarno, the man who recorded this music, believes, and I'm persuaded, that that's the origin of our word okay.
Really?
Yes, and there's a wonderful film called Oka by Lavinia Courier, who actually worked with Louis and did a Hollywood film, a drama about his life there, which you can get on DVD.
Well,
It's called Oka.
Oka.
So we're Oka.
We're Oka to go.
We're Oka to go.
We're okay to go.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for joining me again here, Geoffrey Clarfield.
It's always my pleasure.
Journalist, amazing writer as well. Go to Geoffrey's Journeys. You'll see he's got lots of writings there, photo galleries, safari to Kenya, and beautiful photographs. You got to go there. But it's better to go to Africa. I would love to go. I can't
well,
go.
Next safari.
Next safari.
Summer.
There you
We'll
go.
arrange it.
Boy, can you see me on safari. And here we oh my God. Little pith helmet there. Everything's good.
A wide-brimmed hat.
A wide-brimmed hat and lots
Right,
of
like
mosquito
Curious
netting.
George.
There you go. Curious Joyce is more like it.
Curious Joyce.
Anyway,
Why not?
so we're going to go out, and it's still 15 degrees. So this is yay.
It's almost tropical.
It's almost it's like patio weather. Okay, enjoy. We'll be back next week, and this is yay.
Oka.
Oka.
More far away, more homes, more voices. Radio Voces Latinas. As Latin as you. As Latin as you. As Latin as you.
CHHA.